India's COVID tally is on the decline. In fact, the daily infections today have come in at around 70,000 cases, which is the lowest that we've seen in 74 days. So as we're seeing the COVID cases, the second wave ebb, and of course various states reopening, how does Finance Ministry see the state of the economy? In conversation with us is the Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. K.V. Krishnamurthy Subramanian. Sir, appreciate you taking your time out and speaking with us today at ET Now. Let me first begin by asking you, we're seeing the second wave of COVID-19 ebb. Major states have started opening in a big way, whether it is Delhi, Maharashtra, various other states as well, allowing various activities to take place. I want to understand from you on your assessment of where we stand so far.
So, Ruchi, if you would recall, after the financial year numbers had come, I had mentioned in my presentation that if you look at the last 10 days of the month of May, a lot of the high frequency indicators had hit their trough and were starting to go up. And I think with the second wave continuing to decline, and in fact the pace of decline being as rapid as the pace of rise, these high frequency indicators are continuing their recovery. With the unlock also happening, or the removal of restrictions happening across states, I think the recovery should get accelerated. And if we look at the overall assessments that we had made, if you recall, we had done two scenarios, one of which was the expected one where the peak would be hit for new infections by mid-May. That happened on 8th of May. So that scenario is what is transpiring so far. So I think that the recovery should continue, and with the announcement of front loading of the infrastructure spending, which was one of the key aspects of the budget as well, and the analysis that we had done for the Q4 numbers, where the significantly higher capital expenditure spending meant that construction activity increased by about 15%, and that had its positive spillovers on the contact sensitive sectors and the consumption as well. So I think these should help in the recovery going forward.
Right. While we're talking about a recovery from the current levels, we've seen the RBI, the central bank, slashing India's forecast for FY22 to 9.5% as against 10.5%, whereas other economists, agencies have also slashed the growth forecast for FY22. As a chief economic advisor, how are you looking at the numbers as to where we're going to end this fiscal year after the kind of impact that we've seen from the second wave and of course the impending third wave, which we of course don't know about?
So a couple of points on this, Ruchi. Firstly, if you again recall, I'd mentioned that we've done an internal assessment. Given the uncertainty, we've not given an estimate per se, but what we have done is that our analysis suggests that the impact should not be very large. If you look at the RBI estimate from 10.5, they decreased it to 9.5, so a 1% decrease. Our own estimation, the expected scenario which has manifested, suggests that the impact should not be very large, but impact will be there. I think that undeniably there will be some impact. The reason that the impact is not likely to be as large is because the restrictions have, for one, been heterogeneous and asynchronous in timing, and that's why the April month, for instance, only a few states there were restrictions. May there were more restrictions. And I think if we look at the GST numbers that have come in as well, it reflects the fact that the asynchronicity of these restrictions meant that the impact on economic activities has not been as large. There is some impact, of course, but not that large. And I think that is something that we can look at. If you also look at the IIP numbers, of course, coming off a low base, but still, even on a month-on-month basis, I think there's been some good. Today, I also, if you look at the advanced tax estimates as well, they seem to be along good lines. And I think these are important because compared to some of the survey numbers, tax numbers are actual consumption, and say they show revealed preference. And so overall, I think the recovery should continue, and especially the vaccination effort is really critical for the third wave. There's a nice article by Dr. Devi Shetty, who has said, and one of the experts, if the vaccination proceeds along at a fast pace, the third wave may not be as intense.
While we're talking about the vaccination, there has been a lot of emphasis given on how critical the jabs are going to be for recovery, given the fact that now the government has said that we will be looking to centralize the entire vaccination program, but yet we see the numbers not pick up in terms of vaccination. In a lot of rural areas, there seems to be a lot of hesitancy, and that is, of course, one of the stumbling blocks. So given the kind of concerns that are emanating, how do you see the entire immunization program impacting the pace of our recovery?
So I think the specifics of the vaccination program, I would leave that for the health ministry to comment on. But I do think that, given the projected ramp up in supplies in the month of August and September, there is significant ramp up, and with us having done about 42 lakhs, with just one shift of 8 to 9 hours, during the so far, I think there is definite possibility for us to be able to do much more. If, for instance, in the month of August and September, we can, increase the daily throughput significantly, that it can be done. I think the vaccine hesitancy has declined significantly. I was looking through a consumer survey that has been done by some of the consulting organizations, which shows that if you compare, about 6 months back to now, there has been significant decline in vaccine hesitancy. Those that are, sitting at the fence have actually gone down significantly. And while there is some vaccine hesitancy still in the rural areas, it's greater, a little bit greater in rural areas than in urban areas. It has come down significantly and has declined sharply in the urban areas. And I mentioned that because from the perspective of the economic recovery, the urban areas are quite critical, and there, vaccine hesitancy having come down significantly is something that actually should help the vaccination effort and thereby also the recovery.
Right. So the concern that many have at this point of time as the second wave is ebbing is the fact that demand has taken a big hit. RBI's consumer confidence survey also seems to reflect that demand indeed has taken a hit. There's of course a fear psychosis that's playing on the minds of people due to an impending third wave. So how is the government now looking to get demand back on track, because that is going to be critical?
So as we were discussing earlier to an earlier question that you had mentioned, Ruchi, if you look at the Q4 numbers and the numbers there were evidence of the impact of construction activity and infrastructure spending on various sectors. We saw the impact of the construction activity on contact sensitive sectors, and also on the on consumption itself. Do keep in mind, in the month of March, the fear of the pandemic also had decreased significantly, and that had helped the contact sensitive sectors to, the demand for those to come back significantly. So I think the vaccination effort is really critical, to the reduction in the fear of the pandemic, and thereby, a similar retrieval of demand in the contact sensitive sectors. So I think the efforts that are being made on the vaccination side are, I think, quite important on this count. But at the same time, the increase or the front loading of the capital expenditures that have been budgeted, do keep in mind that the budget was significantly expansionary on the fiscal side and especially focused on asset creation, thereby especially increasing infrastructure spending. So the front loading of that, and you must have followed the fact that the ministry is coordinating with other ministries to try and actually ensure that this front loading actually happens. I think that would be also a very important component in bringing construction activity, thereby helping the urban poor, because construction activity is really important for jobs in the informal sector. So the combination of these two and the restrictions being removed, I think, will be an important part in the driving of demand. Last point I must mention is the impact of investment activity itself. We saw in the fourth quarter at about 34% of GDP, the gross fixed capital formation had been almost a 24-25 quarter high, and I think that the reason I mentioned that is because investment, the impact of that through the virtuous cycle is far more, far longer, felt longer, and that is something which should come back now with the restrictions, being removed. So that should also play a role in bringing back the demand.
Right. I must ask you, sir, on a case that is being made for a stimulus as well. I know the budget was put forth only in the month of February, but now top leaders of India Inc. believe that there is a need for some sort of a direct support and perhaps relief for some stress sectors as well. While the government has widened the scope of the ECLGS, I want to understand from you on what kind of a room do we have for any kind of a stimulus, and more importantly, is the government at all looking at a fiscal stimulus at this point of time?
So, Ruchi, as you have mentioned, the budget was significantly expansionary, and the philosophy that underlied the budget, which is focus on healthcare, focus on infrastructure spending, was widely applauded by stakeholders across the board, and that philosophy has also been seen working when in the fourth quarter numbers that I had mentioned, the improvement in construction activity, thereby creating positive spillovers in several of the sectors. So both the philosophy, which has been acknowledged, and the evidence of that working is, I think, something that we have to keep in mind. So given our earlier, the discussion that we had, the front loading of capital expenditure will play an important role. That said, as has been the case over the entire duration of the pandemic, the government, is more than willing to listen to all the stakeholders, and and after seeing how the impact of this is panning out, will be more than ready to respond on this.
Having said that, sir, the pandemic, of course, has hit certain sectors like hospitality and tourism, some of the contact-intensive sectors, pretty disproportionately. In fact, reports indicate as many as 270 hotels had to shut down. Given the fact that we're seeing these kind of concerns, and tourism as well as hospitality sector do employ a lot of people, how open is the government to the idea of providing relief to these sectors, or are we just betting on the fact that once the economies do open up, people will begin traveling and these sectors will come up?
Ruchi, this is definitely being considered. I think we are quite receptive to the reports that we receive on the impact of the second wave on these sectors, we track the developments in these sectors very closely. So as I've mentioned, as the government has done over the last 1 year, we are quite receptive and are considering the necessary measures in this area.
How soon can we expect an announcement? I do understand that it's very tough to tell us the timeline, but if you can give us any kind of an idea on how soon can we expect any relief for some of these stress sectors?
Ruchi, I will stay within my Lakshman Rekha of, giving the advice on these, and it is for the Honorable Finance Minister and, and the others to come up and talk about the timing, etc.
I also want to ask you, sir, on the ability for us to provide any kind of a fiscal support. The RBI governor in the last monetary policy said that there is a need for a policy support from all sides. Given the fact that we are, we have seen announcements such as the centralization of the vaccine program, in fact, free food that has been extended till the month of November, and besides that, a possibility and a likelihood for hiking the MNREGA investments, MNREGA allocation as well. How much room do we have fiscally, given the fact that from 9.3% this year in terms of our fiscal deficit, we have to hit a lower number of 6.8%?
So, firstly, Ruchi, as you yourself mentioned in the question, a lot of the essential sectors have, been taken care of through the, especially individuals, through the Garib Kalyan Yojana and the vaccination effort as well. I think there is going to be some impact, on the fisc because of these measures. But at the same time, as we were discussing earlier, the GST and the direct taxes collection seems to be encouraging. And as I have insisted, and we had mentioned in the economic survey as well, in times like these, I think the focus has to be on doing what is necessary. And as it turns out, I think given the tax collections, etc., it seems like that should not necessarily be as much of a constraint. The key aspect is basically assessing, the need.
Right. Having said that, sir, you did talk about how the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has been speaking to various PSUs as well as ministries to front load capex, to push infrastructure-related, infrastructure-related spending as well. But does that really mean that it is still going to be some time before we see private investment once again coming in? Is private sector investment the missing piece in India's growth story?
So, Ruchi, as I was mentioning, the Q4 numbers, if you look at the gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP at 34%, and if you unpack that number as well, of course, a good part of the contribution on that was from the government's infrastructure spending, but it was also due to the the investment from the private sector. And I think if you look since September of last year, this is one area where things have been quite encouraging, which is the investment side. And as we've demonstrated in the economic survey, typically when you look at the macroeconomic cycle, once investment starts going up, the impact of that on consumption is felt through the positive impact of investment on growth. So this has been a positive aspect since the September of last year. So I think investment, especially given the seminal reforms that have been done across the board on many sectors, be it the privatization, be it the enterprise policy, or the labor reform, agriculture reforms. These are all actually aspects that really are catered to increasing investment, and the impact of that was being felt already before the second wave has sort of created a pause in this. But I do anticipate investment to pick up again once some of these the impact of the second wave actually peters off.
Before I let you go, sir, I also have to ask you on how are you assessing the health of the banking sector, because many believe that once some of these pandemic-related relaxations are done away with, we will see the NPAs pile up in the banking sector, and there are, of course, a lot of financial sector vulnerabilities at this point of time that we're seeing as far as banks are concerned. The budget had earmarked certain funds for recap. Will we be open to more recap as far as the banking space is concerned, and how are we looking at the kind of financial sector vulnerabilities as we're coming out of the second wave of the pandemic?
So Ruchi, if you look at the some of the broad parameters for the Indian financial sector, firstly, banks raised more than 50,000 crores in capital. This was a phenomenon of once bitten, twice shy, because the banking sector had encountered difficulties even before the pandemic. Therefore, anticipating some of the effects of the pandemic, the banking sector actually went and prepared itself. Similarly, if you look at the provision coverage as well, has been more than 85%, and that is also quite important, because your first line of defense, against bad loans is the provision coverage. Only after the provision coverage is used up do you actually have to go towards, on the capital side. And even on the capital, as I said, it has been, capital has been raised. And as we will see the financials of banks being announced now, we will see that I think the overall performance of banks has been pretty okay. So overall, I think when you look at the banking sector, I think it has prepared itself well to take care of some of the eventualities that were going to manifest due to the pandemic. So there will be some impact of the second wave as well. I think the impact on the balance sheets of especially some of the smaller firms may be something that the banks will have to watch out for. But overall, I think that we have sort of the banking sector has prepared well. In some sense, I think the difficulties in the financial sector before COVID made them cautious, and thereby they've actually prepared by taking the necessary steps.
Right. Having said that, I've of course focused a lot on the economy, but there's another pressing issue that a lot of investors really want to know about as to where we are in terms of our thinking, in terms of policy making, and that is of course the latest on bitcoins. We did see a lot of volatility coming in as far as bitcoins are concerned. There's still no clarity on where India stands, at least on a regulatory front, because we don't have a cryptocurrency law just yet. But now reports seem to indicate that perhaps we may look at cryptocurrencies as an asset class. Given the fact that the RBI, market regulator, SEBI, all have raised concerns regarding the regulation of cryptocurrencies, how are we, from the policy making side, really approaching this issue?
So conceptually, Ruchi, whenever you look at a financial innovation, the most important question that has to be asked is, what is the benefit or the cost of that financial innovation for the real sector. And I think that is the more bottom line assessment that has to be used when we try to look at these innovations. Because if, for instance, the real sector is not going to, let's say, experience positive spillovers, then such innovations can just end up becoming a zero-sum game within the financial sector itself, and then from a policy perspective, the welfare gains that one is looking for may not be very obvious. So I think that is the most important aspect that has to be seen here. Any financial innovation, what is the positive impact that it can create for the real sector? And that is indeed the bottom line through which actually we should be looking at this particular aspect as well.
So does that mean that bitcoins will no longer be, as once the finance ministry called it, a Ponzi scheme, and we will see a more positive approach to this whole issue of cryptocurrencies?
Ruchi, as an economist, I've actually framed the way the thinking should be about this important aspect. The framing of that is one aspect, of course, but the results that come out of that framework are a different matter. So I would urge you to not read any more into this than the framing of the problem itself.
How soon can we expect the cryptocurrency laws being put into place? It was supposed to come in the last session of the parliament, but then got delayed. But can we expect it in the monsoon session? Will it be ready by then?
As I had responded to an earlier question of yours, I think aspects relating to the timing of these things are better addressed to people who are in a better position to answer the same.
Okay, sir. All right. On that note, appreciate you taking your time out and speaking with us on a whole host of issues, including the state of the economy and, of course, what's happening with cryptocurrencies. Thank you very much for speaking to ET Now.
My pleasure.